Kleber, worn out by the routine, found himself once again in charge of taking care of the finances of his father, Carmino, an 84-year-old man who needed constant care. He was impatiently counting the money to pay Rosa, the nurse who looked after his father. "Here's your payment," Kleber said, handing over the envelope with evident frustration. Rosa, thanking him, reminded him of the need for more funds for diapers, medicine and winter clothes for the elderly man. With a bitter expression, Kleber cruelly thought that his father was just a source of expenses. After the caregiver left, Carmino, sitting in his wheelchair and laughing at the sound of the television, invited his son to watch with him. But instead of a gesture of affection, Kleber responded harshly, "I have to work to pay for your things, I don't even have peace anymore," leaving his father hurt and with a sad look on his face. The glow of joy that had previously lit up Carmino's face disappeared, replaced by the pain of being treated with such indifference. Without looking back, Kleber left, slamming the door, oblivious to the heavy atmosphere he had left behind. The sound of the television, which had previously brought laughter, now seemed like an empty echo in an environment where Carmino felt abandoned. As he drove, Kleber was immersed in his own thoughts, indifferent to the pain he had caused. The love and respect for his father had disappeared, replaced by selfishness and ingratitude. All this because, since his mother's death, Carmino had become his responsibility, something that Kleber clearly did not want to carry. The single man in the family, with no children to raise or a partner to share his days with, had a stable and financially comfortable life, which set him apart from his siblings. Because of this, he ended up being chosen, albeit reluctantly, to take care of his father, Carmino, an elderly man who required constant care. Kleber, despite having this responsibility, did not want it. He dreamed of freedom, carefree nights, and the idea of taking care of his father seemed like a prison. His siblings, on the other hand, despite facing financial and family difficulties, always showed affection for Carmino. Their visits were the moments that brightened the old man's days, who smiled when he saw each of them, with the exception of Kleber. While the other children had genuine affection for their father, Kleber treated him coldly, offering only the minimum to support him. Every request from Rosa, the caregiver, was seen as an extra burden, and he became irritated when he thought about the money and time he had to spend. This old man, not even to leave soon, he thought cruelly, while he fed the resentment that transformed the home into an oppressive environment. For Kleber, his father was nothing more than an obstacle that limited his freedom. Wrapped in selfishness, he saw Carmino as a burden, ignoring the silent love and hope that the old man still had for a gesture of affection. Every day, Carmino waited in vain for a moment of affection from his eldest son, who remained indifferent. That day, Kleber returned home furious, his face marked by rage after a flat tire on the way back from shopping for his father. When he came in, he threw the bag on the table aggressively, shouting, "If it weren't for you, my car would be intact. All because of you." He blamed his father for everything, without a shred of empathy. Carmino, with tears in his eyes, apologized, his voice trembling, "Forgive me, son. I didn't mean to." But Kleber, hardened, interrupted him, pouring out more cruel words, "You only bring me problems, you shouldn't have even been born." The frail man plunged into sadness, as his tears fell, reflecting the pain of a broken heart, suffocated by the contempt of his own son. The old man's tears carried the weight of years of love and sacrifice, which now seemed wasted. His sobs echoed like a melody of pain, and he felt completely ignored, his affection wasted. "I'm sorry for being a burden, son, an unwanted burden," he murmured through his tears, but Kleber, overcome with rage, didn't care. Furious about the flat tire on his car, he told his father that he would spend the night in the living room, without being helped to bed, as usual. "You deal with it, old man. I can't take it anymore," he snapped, leaving abruptly and slamming the bedroom door, leaving his father alone in the wheelchair. As night fell, the only thing that filled the silence of the house were Carmino's soft sobs. Kleber didn't even notice that the old man had fallen asleep in the chair, wounded in his soul and huddled in the cold, enveloped by the shadows of abandonment. In his room, his anger grew even more when he discovered, through family messages, that his younger brother, Fernando, had gotten an internship at a mechanical engineering company. That jerk didn't even tell me anything, Kleber thought, his heart darkening even more. The news, which for many would have been a source of joy, lit a perverse spark in Kleber. He saw it as a chance to benefit himself and spent the night devising a plan that, in his twisted mind, would make him happy. In the morning, after a night of intrigue, he woke up and went to see his father. Carmino, with his head down, still wrapped in the cold from the previous night, woke up to his son's touch, his eyes full of fear and tears. Once again, he apologized, "Son, I'm so sorry for everything, I didn't mean to be a burden to you." To Carmino's surprise, Kleber treated him in an unusual way, with a strange gentleness. He dressed his father in warm clothes and prepared him a hearty breakfast. The old man, although confused, accepted that moment as a possible gesture of redemption for the cruel behavior of the previous night. But his hope was short-lived. As soon as he finished his coffee, Kleber, dry and evasive, said, "Now let's go." Carmino, intrigued, asked where they were going. "We're going to visit Fernando, to congratulate him on his internship," Kleber replied, in a cold voice. Carmino, naive and excited, smiled happily. "That's great. I miss him," he said, little knowing that the truth behind this departure was much darker than he could have imagined. When they arrived, Kleber took his father out of the car, put him in the wheelchair and rang Fernando's doorbell. Before the door was even opened, Kleber ran back to the car. Confused and scared, Mr. Carmino shouted, "Son, what are you doing? Where are you going?" Kleber, with a coldness that hurt more than the winter wind, replied, "Now you are his problem, not mine. I've spent too much time taking care of you. He has money, if he wants, he can take care of you." With that, he sped off, leaving his father helpless. Old Carmino, stunned, was left alone in the wheelchair, with the fine rain mixing with the tears that fell down his face. Each drop seemed to carry the pain of abandonment, and his heart, broken, could barely process what had just happened. Why did he do this? He whispered to himself, feeling lost, like a child left in a cold and cruel world. With every meter the car advanced, a piece of his soul seemed to be detached. Meanwhile, Kleber, back at home, felt a false sense of relief. Finally free, he murmured, believing that he had gotten rid of a burden. But fate had other plans. Less than a month had passed when Kleber found out, through a neighbor, that his father had inherited a large fortune from a distant uncle. "What? What do you mean?" Kleber exclaimed in disbelief. He soon remembered that his father was adopted and had never met his biological family, but now the inheritance changed everything. Wasting no time, Kleber went to Fernando's house. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted with a look of contempt. "Now you're coming, huh? After a month without any news, you show up because of the inheritance?" Fernando snapped. Kleber tried to enter, but Fernando stopped him. "You abandoned our father, left him in the cold. Now you want part of the inheritance. He never wants to see you again." Kleber insisted, but Fernando was firm, "Go away, before I call the police." And with that, he slammed the door in his brother's face. Kleber, consumed by anger and regret, tried to justify his actions, but the weight of his wrong choices was inescapable. He even tried to go to court to claim his share, but the court always defeated him. The situation of his father, who had been abandoned by Kleber, weighed against him. In the end, Carmino found joy and comfort in the arms of his other children, who truly loved him, regardless of the money. Kleber, isolated and alone, finally understood what he had lost, his father's unconditional love. On a typical winter day, with the sky gray and the sun hidden behind the clouds, Julia, a curious 10-year-old girl, was returning home after another day of school. Her quickened steps accompanied the lively conversation with her friends, where the main topic was the arrival of a new sister for one of the girls in the group. "My mom had a baby, now I have a little sister named Livia," exclaimed her friend proudly. Julia, with a touch of envy mixed with affection, sighed, "Oh, I always wanted a little brother, but my mom said she can't have any more children." The conversation continued, as the children approached a forest that bordered the path back home. In the middle of that vegetation, there was an abandoned trailer, which for a long time had fueled legends and ghost stories among the little ones. "Have you heard that the trailer is haunted? My brother swears he saw a ghost there," said one of the boys with wide eyes, staring into the darkness of the forest. Julia, trying to hide her nervousness, scoffed, "What nonsense! Ghosts don't exist. If I had a brother, he would protect me from this nonsense." The group of friends began to challenge each other, with one of them teasing, "I doubt anyone here would have the courage to go near the trailer." Not wanting to show fear, Julia felt her heart race, but she answered resolutely, "I would have the courage. There's nothing there." Determined to prove their courage, the friends changed their route and went deeper into the forest. As they advanced through the dense vegetation, where the sun's rays barely passed through the leaves, the suspense grew, and the trailer seemed closer and closer. Each step made the environment seem more mysterious, and the air of adventure mixed with fear grew in Julia's chest. The unknown called to her, and the challenge of exploring that place that mixed the real and the imaginary made everything even more exciting and, at the same time, frightening for the kids. "I doubt you'll have the courage to go there, Julia," the friends teased, challenging the girl. She stopped for a moment, staring at the forest that, under the growing fog, seemed even more mysterious. "Yes, I do. I'll show you that there's nothing there," she replied, determined to prove her bravery. The path to the abandoned trailer was surrounded by sounds and shadows that made the children's imagination run wild. "I wonder if there are ghosts?" asked one of the friends, his voice trembling. "I bet there's a monster in there," whispered another, trying to scare the others. Despite the fear that was beginning to grow inside Julia, she continued on, looking around cautiously. What Julia was about to discover, however, was something she could never have imagined. "Just go in and show us that there's nothing there," she thought, as she opened the rusty door of the trailer. The interior was like a scene from a horror movie. Moss covered the overturned furniture, the smell of mold permeated the air, and the broken windows made daylight practically non-existent inside. Each step increased her tension, but she tried to convince herself that there was nothing to fear. Just as she was ready to scream that everything was empty, a scream of horror escaped her lips. In a dark corner, where the bedroom would be, Julia saw the body of a woman. Her pale face, purple lips, and the deathly silence of the scene were disturbing. Her friends, upon hearing the scream, ran into the trailer and were paralyzed by what they found. But the horror did not end there. In the woman's arms, a small baby, wrapped in a dirty blanket, began to cry, breaking the terrifying silence. The shocking sight froze Julia, who could not believe what she was seeing. The baby, forgotten and defenseless, had survived there, wrapped in tragedy. Trembling with fear and still processing everything, Julia took the baby in her arms and, without thinking twice, said, "We have to get out of here." Everyone ran from the trailer, terrified, but Julia kept the baby safe in her arms. When she arrived home, her parents were shocked to see their daughter with a child. "Where did this baby come from?" asked the father, scared and confused. Still panting, Julia told the whole story, from the challenge to the discovery in the trailer. The parents, in disbelief, listened attentively, and her mother, with tears in her eyes, hugged Julia and the baby. Then, with an innocence that contrasted with the gravity of the situation, Julia asked, "Could he be my little brother, Mommy?" Her parents exchanged looks, full of compassion. "Daughter, it's not that simple. We need to call the police and find his family," the father began, but was interrupted by the mother, who in a soft but determined voice said, "For now, we'll take care of him. He needs us." With a shy smile, Julia hugged the baby affectionately. "We'll take good care of him until we find his family," she promised, beaming. While the father called the police, the mother stroked the hair of her daughter and the baby, moved by the strange and unexpected turn of events in their lives. Amidst the chaos and tragedy, Julia felt that this baby was an unexpected gift from the universe. The journey of having Julia was not easy for the family. Her mother went through several treatments and moments of uncertainty before finally being able to give birth, which was considered a true miracle. After the birth, the couple dreamed of expanding their family, hoping to have 1 or 2 more children. However, life brought unexpected challenges. Hai was diagnosed with uterine cancer, a difficult battle that, despite being overcome, left deep scars. In addition to threatening her life, the disease meant that she could no longer get pregnant, as her uterus had to be removed. This turn of events devastated the dream of giving their daughter a little brother. In a painful conversation, the parents explained to little Julia, who was only 7 years old, that they would not be able to fulfill her wish. The heartbroken girl cried for days. The couple, in turn, also suffered when they saw the sadness in their daughter's eyes. They even considered adoption, but the bureaucratic process and the long waiting list discouraged their plans. The hope of expanding their family was fading. When Julia showed up at home with the baby she had found in the trailer, she saw the child as a gift from the universe, an answer to her dreams of having a little brother. For Julia, the baby was her chance to finally have the companion she had longed for. Despite being moved by their daughter's happiness, the parents knew they had to do the right thing. There was a dead mother and an abandoned baby involved, which required calling the authorities. With heavy hearts, they called the police, but they didn't realize that the parents of Julia's friends had already done the same. With so many calls, the case quickly gained priority attention. While they waited for the authorities to arrive, the parents tried to prepare Julia for the possibility that they would have to say goodbye to the baby. "We want to help, honey, but we have to do the right thing," they explained, while she, still hugging the child, believed that he was the little brother she had longed for. The investigation revealed a moving story. The woman found in the trailer was a young mother who had fled a difficult situation and, alone, gave birth in that desolate place, far from any help. In the last months, she had faced great adversity, without support from family or friends. In the abandoned trailer, isolated and in the middle of the harsh winter, she did everything she could to keep her baby warm, using the only blanket she had. However, she succumbed to the cold. Her last act of love ensured her son's survival. Near the body of the young mother, investigators found a letter written in shaky handwriting, stained with tears. The message pleaded, with her last breath of hope, "If anyone finds my son, please take care of him. He is all I have." These moving words deeply touched the community, revealing the strength of a love that transcended tragedy. Moved by the story of the young mother and her sacrifice, the news spread, generating a wave of solidarity and support. At Julia's house, the arrival of the baby brought a new perspective to the parents. Touched by the gesture of their deceased mother and the immediate bond that Julia formed with the child, the family began to seriously consider the possibility of taking care of him. After countless conversations and reflections, they made a decision that would change their lives forever. "He is already part of our family," said Julia's mother, looking at the baby snuggled in her daughter's arms. "We can't just leave him," added the father, stroking the little one's head. "We will take care of him. He deserves love, a home and a family." This unexpected decision made Julia's dream of having a little brother come true in a way that no one could have imagined. The tragedy of her mother in the trailer gave way to a new beginning for the baby, surrounded by love and hope. Julia's parents soon began legal proceedings to adopt the child, determined to give him the love and care he deserved, thus honoring his mother's last request. After all the investigations and emotional revelations, the decision was clear: the little boy would be welcomed into their home and into their hearts. The police investigation, which lasted for weeks, brought to light even darker details about the woman's life. The young mother was Vivian Mercedes, the same girl who, 10 years earlier, had been kidnapped by a disturbed man and held captive for a decade. The tragedy that marked Vivian's life began when her family, parents and siblings, were killed in a car accident, deliberately caused by the kidnapper, who planned everything to isolate her. At the time, Vivian's disappearance, then only 18 years old, caused great commotion. Despite intense investigations, the case was closed after a year with no concrete leads. Years later, now 28 years old and pregnant, Vivian managed to escape. One cold night, she ran through the woods and found refuge in the only place that seemed safe, the abandoned trailer. Without assistance and facing extreme conditions, she gave birth alone. However, the relentless cold and exhaustion eventually overcame her. In her final moments, Vivian wrote a letter on a pad found in the trailer, with a touching plea, "If anyone finds my son, please take care of him. His name is Caleb." As the police continued to investigate the case, the man responsible for all of Vivian's suffering was found in his own home, tied up. He panicked when arrested and confessed that, in an act of desperation, Vivian had struck him and fled. The kidnapper was eventually convicted, ending a story of pain, but leaving behind a legacy of Vivian's courage and resilience. Convicted of the horrendous crimes they had committed, the revelation of the truth shocked and moved the community, especially because of the courage and suffering of the young mother. After the trial, with Julia's family already deeply attached to the baby, the news that they had received the judge's authorization to adopt him brought an outpouring of support, especially from those who were rooting for the little boy's well-being. Without hesitation, Rodney and Hyde decided to formalize the adoption. For them, the baby was not only the fulfillment of Julia's dream of having a sibling, but also an opportunity to expand their family and honor the last wish of Vivian, the mother who fought until the end to protect her son. Julia, who from the beginning saw the baby as a special gift, now had the joy of officially calling him her brother, seeing her dream come true in an unexpected way. The family, which had previously felt incomplete, was now united, and the baby, who had once been lonely and vulnerable in an abandoned trailer, now had a home full of love and hope. What started as a game of exploring a forgotten trailer between friends culminated in something much bigger, the opportunity for Vivian's soul to finally rest in peace, knowing that her son was safe and loved. Meanwhile, at a busy New York airport, Johnny, a 37-year-old man, was excitedly waiting in line to board a flight to California. His mind was filled with thoughts of relaxing days on sunny beaches, barely noticing the people around him. Suddenly, he spotted an elderly woman behind him, which made him recall an unnerving moment he had witnessed earlier near the airport bathrooms. Sitting on a bench, Johnny heard the woman on the phone say something that gave him chills. "No one will suspect an old lady like me. The device is here." All they'll hear is a boom. Tension began to take hold of him. Is she talking about a bomb? He thought as the woman walked away. Disturbed by the conversation, he stood frozen, unsure if he had understood everything correctly. Shortly after, they announced that his flight was boarding, and Johnny, now in line, felt his heart race when he saw the old woman in front of him. Is she going to board my plane with a bomb? He thought anxiously. When it was his turn to board, he ran to the plane, trying to control his rapid breathing. When he saw her being the last to board, rummaging through her bag, Johnny could no longer contain his apprehension and ran to the flight attendants, with a trembling voice and a desperate look, to report his suspicions. "Excuse me, but I need to tell you something urgent. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I heard a lady talking about a device. I think it's a bomb, and she's coming on this flight." Johnny, still nervous, reported the situation to the flight attendants, who quickly realized the gravity of what he was saying. They listened to him attentively while the woman, already approaching the plane, remained unaware that her plan had been discovered. The light and expectant atmosphere in the airport quickly turned to tension and apprehension. The flight attendant, clearly worried, asked, "Are you sure about what you heard?" Johnny, with his heart racing and still shaken, nodded firmly. "If she gets on, this plane will explode," he said, his voice shaking with fear. The elderly woman approached, with an innocent smile on her face, greeting the flight attendants. "Good afternoon, gentlemen." However, she was quickly stopped by one of the flight attendants. "Ma'am, we need to check your bag," said the flight attendant, trying to remain calm. The woman, surprised by the request, showed an expression of displeasure. "It's just my medicine, dear. I've already been searched at security," she protested, clutching her bag tightly. Johnny, watching closely, felt his fear growing. The flight attendant insisted, "We understand, ma'am, but it's our protocol. If it's just medicine, it won't be a problem." The woman hesitated for a moment, but then her expression changed drastically. Suddenly, she pulled a gun out of her bag and pointed it at the flight attendants. Panic took hold of the passengers. "She's armed," someone shouted, while others began to scream and run. "You're going to let me in, yes," threatened the old woman, advancing towards the plane door, her revolver unlocked. "Or I'll shoot every single one of you right here." It was then that Johnny, in a burst of courage, acted. In a quick movement, he ran towards the woman, diverting her arm and the gun upward. Almost as soon as she was about to fire, he managed to disarm her, pushing her with all his strength out of the plane. She fell to the floor of the jetway, and Johnny, still in shock, shouted for the flight attendants to lock the door. The flight attendants quickly closed and locked the door. Outside, shots were heard being fired at the door by the woman, but everyone was already safely inside the plane. Within minutes, airport security arrived, subdued and handcuffed the woman. She was led away, her screams still audible as the situation was resolved. Inside the plane, a wave of relief washed over the passengers. Suddenly, applause began to echo through the cabin, with everyone thanking Johnny for his bravery. Even the pilot, over the intercom, made an announcement: "Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank passenger Johnny Pastini for his extraordinary courage. Today, he is our hero." Once again, the plane erupted in applause. Still stunned by what had happened, Johnny tried to settle back into his seat, breathing deeply as the impact of his actions began to weigh on him. Johnny took a deep breath, trying to calm his body and convince himself that he was truly safe. The journey that had started so terrifyingly was now continuing with him being treated like a hero by everyone on board. The tension on the flight had eased, but the whispers and curious looks directed at him revealed everyone's admiration and relief. As a gesture of recognition, he was even given champagne, something normally reserved for first class. About 2 hours into the flight, Johnny began to feel restless and decided to go to the bathroom to compose himself. As he walked down the aisle, he could hear passengers still talking about what had happened. However, when he reached the bathroom, the door was locked. "Hello, are you busy?" he asked, knocking lightly on the door. "Just a moment, I'll be right out," a voice replied on the other side. Lost in thought, Johnny waited, but time passed and nothing happened. It had been about 10 minutes and he was starting to get impatient. He knocked again, this time louder. "Will it take long?" he asked as the door slowly began to open. What he saw left him petrified with fear. "Oh my God!" he stammered, recoiling in shock. It was the old woman he had pushed out of the plane. She emerged from the cabin with a sinister smile, her eyes brimming with malice. How is she here?" Johnny thought, feeling his heart race. He retreated even further, shouting, "She's here." The flight attendants and passengers ran when they heard the screams. The woman, with a malevolent look, held a gun and, in a cold voice, murmured, "You tried to stop me, but you won't be able to." Johnny tried to move away, but before he could react, the old woman stared at him and said, "I'm going to finish you off." In one swift movement, she hit him in the head with the butt of the gun. Everything went dark as Johnny fell to the ground, surrounded by the despairing screams of the passengers. When Johnny woke up, he found himself in a completely different and disturbing scenario. He was strapped into a chair on the plane, now empty and surrounded by flashing lights from police cars. Disorientation took over his mind. "What happened?" he mumbled, confused, as he tried to understand what was happening. A serious-looking police officer stood in front of him. "Look at me," the officer said, trying to bring Johnny back to reality. Still groggy, he looked at the officer. "Where is everyone?" he asked, feeling the throbbing pain of the butt of his gun. The officer, standing firm, showed a photo. Johnny's eyes widened immediately. It was the image of the lady. "Do you know who this woman is?" the officer asked, his voice clear with urgency. Johnny, still shaken, stammered as he tried to explain how the woman had tried to destroy the plane and how he had pushed her out. But he couldn't understand how she had reappeared in the bathroom. "She had a bomb, she was going to destroy everything," he exclaimed, his voice trembling. Where is she?" "Johnny, try to remember." "Look at her, remember," the policeman insisted. At that moment, Johnny's mind was flooded with disturbing flashes, distorted images of a bloodied woman with a contorted face, creating a surreal confusion that engulfed him completely. Johnny tried to escape the painful memories that invaded his mind, but the disturbing visions persisted. He saw the face of a woman marked by grief, who he soon discovered was his own mother. The officer, with a grave expression, told him, "You killed her, Johnny." These words hit him like an electric shock, bringing back fragmented memories that now came together into a clear and terrifying image. What had really happened? Little by little, the dark truth came to light. The woman who appeared in his hallucinations was his mother, a woman who had always loved him. However, his life changed drastically when he realized that Johnny had become involved with terrorist groups online. He spent hours browsing obscure forums, being shaped by extreme ideologies. His behavior changed, becoming more isolated and irritable, which put his mother on alert. Worried, she tried to confront him, but he, already consumed by conspiracies, began to see her as an enemy. On that tragic day, after an intense argument, Johnny lost control and, in a fit of rage, took his mother's life. Desperate for what he had done, he fled, leaving her lying in the living room. Even so, determined to carry out the terrorist plan, he boarded a flight to California, carrying a bomb and a gun. What Johnny did not know was that his accomplices, after finding his mother's body, alerted the police, who quickly launched a search to capture him. During the flight, the trauma of the murder caused his fragmented mind to create hallucinations, leading him to believe that he was facing a threat. He saw his mother at every corner, transforming an elderly figure into a supposed terrorist. But in reality, Johnny was the one carrying the gun. When he tried to plant the bomb in the bathroom, his delusions worsened, culminating in panicked screams, believing he was fighting his own mother. The flight attendants, aware of who he was, alerted the authorities. Just as his paranoia was taking over, a brave passenger managed to disarm him with a blow, preventing a tragedy. The chaos that reigned on the plane was quickly controlled, and upon landing, Johnny was arrested by the authorities, ending his journey of terror and hallucinations. With the plane surrounded by police cars and emergency teams, Johnny was handcuffed and taken into custody. In the following days, investigations revealed his involvement with terrorists and his struggle with serious mental disorders. Psychiatric diagnoses confirmed his paranoia and hallucinations, which led him to confuse reality with his distorted visions. His story shocked the public and sparked debates about mental health and online radicalization. Johnny was transferred to a maximum security psychiatric institution, where he would face a long process of treatment. Isolated from the world, he walked the halls, now aware of the horrendous acts he had committed. In moments of clarity, he reflected on his life, his choices, and the void left by the loss of his mother, whom he had loved and destroyed so much. Each night, as he lay in his cell, he found himself forever trapped within the walls of his own fear and regret, condemned to live forever with the weight of his actions. If you enjoyed this story, the next video will certainly move you. Don't forget to subscribe, like and activate the bell so you don't miss our next videos. Until the next exciting story.